3, 2, 1, go!
Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Uncalled For. We have a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be talking about more human rights issues and some of the things that we've had happen in the past couple of weeks. Welcome back everybody. It's been an interesting week vacation. So yeah, we're back and we're in business. We're going to have a great show for you tonight. We have Commander 401 with us tonight. We also have Nick from the In Time show with us. We have Claire Esper, and of course our producer Dick Dawson is with us as well. We're just going to jump right in and we're going to get started right at the first thing in the show. You can hear Matthew in the background. So yeah, so how is everybody today?
Good. I'll reserve answering that until after the show's done because maybe some heavy stuff here.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea. How about you, Claire?
I'm doing okay. There's a lot to go over. There's a lot going on. Interesting.
Absolutely.
You know, things don't always appear like you think when you first look at it. That's what I'm learning as I looked at everything today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's still more going on. So we're probably not even fully up to date yet. So I'm sure I'll be finding stuff as we go along too. So yeah. So we not only do we have Iran to cover, we have the Respect for Marriage Act as well. That was passed and sent on to the president's desk.
Yep.
So
It's sitting there now. That's awesome, actually.
that
You-
is very awesome. That's good. Finally.
mm.
So we're
The-
heading in the right direction with that too.
We are. There's a few issues, but
Mhm.
to be honest, at least it does. One of my things when they do these laws that are trying to codify rights for people or the
Yes.
way things should be done federally, they often don't go back and change the language in older laws. But this one, they learned their lesson and they went back to the older laws that defined marriage and changed the language in all of them federally, so that they no longer say a man and a woman, they say two people, two, not 3, 4, 5, 2.
Two.
Okay, two persons. And
Yes.
it actually, the marriage equality, it is not only for LGBTQ, but it also covers in some states the issue of interracial marriage has been a problem. And so it does make it federally that they're covering that also. But
Excellent.
there's things it doesn't do. It does not change any state law that already exists against it.
Right.
And because of the way state and federal laws interact with each other, there's nothing that can be done with that
Right.
currently. But it does give the opposing parties in new elections in those states wanting to bring forward changes to those laws, it gives them a little more strength by having a federal law that backs them up and lets the people speak on it. So
Exactly. Exactly. And from what I was reading too, it looked like, they can get an injunction if they file.
Mhm.
It looks like it'll help protect people who are discriminated against because of,
Mhm.
of state laws and things like that. It looks like they do have some recourse as well.
Mhm.
So
It
that's
it should help as far as getting
exactly.
benefits health-wise for married couples. It should,
Yes.
especially companies that have rules like that. They can't like just say that the marriage doesn't exist anymore. There are ways
Correct.
to fight it now. So it's going to help with a
Mhm.
lot of those smaller problems, especially in healthcare and in private, the health industry itself.
Mhm.
Just by clarifying it. It also transportable, from what I understand, going from state to state. It gives you a vehicle to fight it. As far
Absolutely.
as if you move to another state or whatever that's trying to say that it doesn't exist, it does give you an avenue to help fight it, for you to say, well, it does exist when I had it and where I had it, so I am. It gives
Right.
you more. It doesn't fix everything, obviously.
Right. And it can't, but
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
it is a step in the right direction, and
Mhm.
it's right. And hopefully we can. I was hoping they could do the same thing for
For
the other
us.
thing. Yes.
Well,
For
let's
us
just hope
ladies.
that they learned a little bit of lesson about what happened to us, and that's why they came forward with this, give it a little more, but it's still just not enough until they actually go
Exactly.
back and put equal personage rights, like the individual personage rights, like, person A, B, and C are all the same in the Constitution. This is going to keep happening. Like
Absolutely.
for color, race, creed, sex, sexual preference, all of it. Unless they
Exactly.
just say person and give us all the same rights to life and liberty that we're supposed to be guaranteed in this country, then it's going to keep happening, because that's not codified in the Constitution.
Nope.
Nope. Basically, in the Constitution, you had to be a landowner to have rights in most cases. So, like,
Oops.
whoops. I make
Right.
a joke. It's really not like that, but I make a
Right.
joke. I mean, it is in there like that, but it,
Exactly. We've had subsequent amendments that,
Mhm.
give
Mhm.
people rights to vote. But
Mhm.
yeah, before it was landowners who only had rights. And then,
Yeah.
oops, I rent. So
Mhm.
out I go. So, but yeah,
One second here, everybody. I just have to hit a couple of
sure.
buttons. There's some audio issues going. I got to restart my subsystem. Hold on here. I got to try
Okay.
to fix this quick.
Not a problem.
Mhm.
So, Dick, you're
Okay.
aware it's not just that you got to hit some buttons. You got to hit the right buttons in the right order. I just want to make sure. Don't just start hitting random. We've had this discussion before, Dick. I want to be clear,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You're not just
I
hitting
start
random
by
buttons.
putting my foot into the computer tower.
Mm.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
started with my
Okay.
foot into the computer tower. We'll go from there.
repeatedly.
That's my production method, Dick. I don't advise it for anybody else.
See,
Lift overhead,
I'm
open
just
door,
saying.
check out the door.
So somebody forgot to send the color coded key to Dick today. What?
I think so.
What?
Exactly. So yeah.
I'm old
Pretty
school. Just
easy.
take a hammer, hit it a couple of times, and it'll probably start working right.
Right. Right. That's too funny.
Yeah, there's okay. 1 second here. One second
Sure.
here, guys. I literally have to quit the app and reopen it because I'm like it's really screwed up. Okay, this will take
Okay.
about 5 seconds.
Okay.
And the reason is because
Okay.
my read on the overturning of Roe v. Wade was that they're
Yes.
actually they were talking out of both sides of their mouth. So what they're essentially saying is, well, here's the problem. This can't be decided by the courts unless Congress steps in and creates a law. We can't have the courts legislating that states must all recognize the right to an abortion. So that's how they overturned it. So they essentially, yes, they kicked it to the states. They also kicked it to Congress. The problem is they know full well that if Congress enacts such a law, that law is going to somebody is going to start a case on that. It is going to work its way
Immediately.
up to the Supreme Court. Yep. And then what they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, wait, Congress doesn't actually have the power to do
Right.
this. This has to
Exactly.
be done by amending the Constitution. That's what they did
Right.
in Dred Scott. And if you read the decision, they were setting up the argument to say the Congress does not actually have the ability to impose that on the states, and they've overreached their constitutional authority. So my concern is, while I'm so thrilled that the bill passed, any significant challenge that goes before this court, in my view, is very likely to have it struck down as being outside the powers of the legislature, and unless it's a constitution. Yeah. So I'm happy about it, but it's tentative with the understanding that if this court is still in power when it gets appealed up to them, they have, in my view, telegraphed their intent to essentially argue what was argued in the Dred Scott decision, which is, nope, sorry, Congress can't legislate that. So
Totally agree with
But
that.
isn't that just removing the power of Congress to do anything?
well, no, because Congress has very specific limited what they are in fact permitted to do, but they are not permitted to engineer and do social. And I forget exactly what they would take me a minute to try to remember specifically what outside the bounds this is, but there are very specific laws that they are. One of them is interstate commerce, so they can regulate interstate commerce. That is how and why they can't actually pass a national health care bill legally. They are not empowered to do that by the Constitution. It's illegal. But they can and are the only body that can regulate interstate commerce. So when we decided we wanted national health care, it had to be done as an interstate commerce bill because that was the only thing that they have sufficient power to regulate nationwide.
Correct.
Obviously, this marriage bill, unless you can put it under interstate commerce, treaty ratification, or military.
Most certainly benefits, most certainly health benefits and other things of that nature would be under interstate commerce, because if you could be married to someone in the state of New York or Massachusetts and qualify for spousal benefits, and then you move to another, you're still under the same employer, and you move to another state that says, fuck no.
Well,
It
I would argue that that's not interstate commerce, and that actually was certainly not how it was intended. Now, I'm not a big fan of just originalism and saying how was it intended, but the goal was to prevent states like, say, New York from saying, well, we're going to tax all goods coming from New York into Massachusetts because they have the ability to block those roads. the federal government can step in and say, no, you are not permitted to do that. And constitutionally, they can ensure that the states are treating each other equally. But there's a difference between
Exactly.
saying they're treating each other equally and granting extra. The idea was for state to state influencing that commerce and keeping it fair, not protecting the individuals of each state. So under even a moderately conservative interpretation of the Constitution, what you would find is no, they actually can't do that.
Right.
So I think it's problematic. I'm not saying it's not insurmountable, but it's a problem and a challenge that I think, especially people who were and look, we've lost enough times, and there have been bills that we really loved and that have died, that I think everybody has a sober assessment of any bill.
Right.
It may be temporary, and we hope, and Roe v. Wade lasted a long time, but now that's been taken
Almost
down.
50 years. Yeah.
So I just want to remind people that it doesn't mean even this particular fight is over, because it will go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
And my take on them right now is they will say, nope, sorry, Congress can't legislate it. And if they say that, absent a new U.S. Supreme Court or a constitutional amendment, it's done, it's over, and then it's back to the states.
And it goes back to the states again, which we would hope that with localized voting in a louder voice, maybe it will do like some of the Roe versus Wade cases are doing. We're getting surprised in some of the states we thought would automatically pass a ban. The people rose up and stopped the ban. And they are getting challenged in the courts. I do see that they're getting appealed all over the place because they still want to do it. But the loudest voice that you have is in your state, like where you live. And that's why it's designed this way through the Constitution, right? So that each state, for the people and what they believe and how they want to run things, have the louder voice locally to handle that. When it comes to Roe versus Wade, I keep going back to another country. Australia had the same issue, a very religious opinion on abortion, but they put it to the states, and now everywhere in Australia has some form of where it is not illegal anymore, and there's some way to accommodate in every so-called state within Australia. Which it took a while, it did, but the people spoke. And they voted on it. They say, well, it wouldn't be something I want to do, but I don't want to interfere with somebody else's right. And they actually made it not illegal anymore. And they found ways to accommodate all their different beliefs to do it. And I'm just hoping we can do the same. And I see a little bit of progress there. I mean, yes, there are setbacks, very frustrating setbacks, but you do see a little bit of progress here and there.
Absolutely.
It is the only vehicle we have to work in right now to do it. And so we just hope that we can keep pushing it forward without some kind of constitutional amendments.
Exactly. And Kansas, like going back to the abortion issue, Kansas was one of those that was it Kansas that had the vote? And
I think I was surprised. The people say,
yes.
I believe it is Kansas, that said, no, we don't believe in abortion, but we don't think you can tell them what to do with their body. So they stopped it. Yeah,
they did.
And
that
was
like impressive.
Common sense, and it was actually impressive, because that's all we're asking. Have your beliefs about it, what you want, and do what you want. But a person's personal right to body autonomy is at issue here, and
exactly.
I don't think anybody wants to get, anything done to them or not done to them against their will. And so, that's kind of a bigger issue than what the actual procedure is. It is the fact that you're trying to tell us what we cannot and cannot do.
Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out, I am swayed slightly by the fact that if you're religious, you believe in ensoulment, then what you're looking at with abortion is genocide. And I understand that argument, and I think it's not a bad argument. I'm compassionate about that argument. But right now, for the most part, our own bodily autonomy is so strong that, let's say somebody comes up to you, a criminal, he robs you. While he's robbing you, boom, he shoots you, hits your liver is wiped out, and you're going to die. Now you're in the hospital. They say you got a couple weeks to live, and they find one donor on the entire planet whose liver will work, and it's the man who shot you. Now he will be guilty of murder, if they don't transfer the liver, if they don't do it, and maybe they can transfer only half. So even he will live. He'll live and you'll live. We can undo the damage. Our belief in autonomy is so strong that even this man can say, no, I do not consent. She cannot have part of my liver. And then you're going to end up dying. He will become a murderer of something that could easily be prevented because bodily autonomy said you cannot forcibly remove this liver against his will. That's how strong it is.
I know, but
Absolutely.
yet, Nick, and yet, look what is happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what really irks me about it, because common sense says you shouldn't be able to say this. It's not. It's because they're making it more about the procedure than the actual result of what it means to women in general. And that needs to be pressed a little bit more. Besides the issue of whether you believe it's an appropriate procedure or not, it's the actual violation of body autonomy that really freaks me out the most.
Not to mention that book of Numbers, chapter 5, verse 11 through 22, basically spells out how to perform an abortion. It induces a miscarriage if there's supposed to be this potion that if a woman is unfaithful, it induces a miscarriage, which means that if you're going to say, but the Bible says no abortion, you have to deal with that too.
Well, I'm sympathetic to that argument, but I think most Christians would argue New Covenant theology, which is to say that none of those old laws, including
and I'm not against their
when
beliefs
I
at all.
when I wanted the New Testament, they would give me the Old Testament theology, where I wasn't worthy of any forgiveness whatsoever unless I voted for someone who reminded me of the Nazis who made my high school a living hell.
Oh, listen, if you want me to say that I think most of this is all hypocrisy, I'm completely, I think almost every position against this is hypocritical in some way. But New Covenant theology has been around since it really started in '92 and has been growing, and it's a way to have your cake and eat it too. And it's a tough one to argue against, where they just say, well, Jesus changed the rules and Jesus doesn't want you to commit an abortion, so it doesn't matter. That
not one dot, not one iota will pass from a law until the return of the Son of Man. And Jesus said that.
Well, he came to fulfill the law, and so when he was crucified, the old law was fulfilled, the Mosaic covenant was fulfilled, and then a new covenant with Jesus was that's the central tenet of New Covenant theology. So he has fulfilled the old law by dying, and now Jews are still bound by the old covenant, the Mosaic one, but Christians are bound by what would now be a third covenant with God, which it has fulfilled the old law, so you don't have to follow Leviticus, you don't have to follow Exodus or Judges,
unless it suits your argument. Then you have to follow it.
Which is the biggest argument that is most often used against homosexuality is Leviticus. But since Leviticus is part of the old covenant, then Leviticus no longer applies. So then they can only go to Paul in Corinthians, and Corinthians is problematic at best. But yeah, the number of Christians who go straight to Leviticus and say, oh, here it is. It's like, yeah, but you don't follow any of the other Levitican laws, and there's a reason.
And that is so frustrating, because in a world where we want to have everybody have their own beliefs religiously, okay, they have to acknowledge that theirs is not the only religion. So to base laws and what people can do in our country based on their religious beliefs, on what it says in the Bible and what should be, is just a violation. It's a violation of what we actually stand for.
And Jefferson himself said that. Jefferson said,
yes, he did. And how did we found this country? Because we were over in a country and didn't want to be told what religion to practice and what to be told on how to do it, and came over here with a whole bunch of religions and states and the ability to do that, and how everybody knows the Constitution like that. They didn't really say keep the church out of the state. What they said is everybody has the right to practice it the way they want, and there are allowed to be different opinions, and so we cannot interfere that way with each other. And yet, being the foundation of the Constitution that way, it doesn't mean anything when it's person to person. I don't get it. I mean,
Exactly.
it seems simple to me. It does seem very simple to me in the which back to our topic, Amy, brings us to the one of the I forget his name. I read a lot this week, and my
Yeah.
brain is like mush. But the
Fried.
head of was it the UN? Okay, in human rights, and he did a great speech, and he said it's very, very simple. How about bringing just the human rights aspect back as a priority in every single country? And maybe a lot of this bullshit will stop, including America, by the way, with all of
Exactly.
this going on, because it is a right. We have the same right, whether you be LGBTQ, whether you be
Right.
a woman. We have the same right to liberty and freedom.
Right.
You know,
We do.
yeah.
We do.
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
yeah. Speaking of
Mm.
human rights, we've had some really interesting things happening in human rights and things
Mhm.
like that. Like Iran was another place that,
Mhm.
apparently we've been hearing reports. I won't say that they're confirmed yet because I still haven't really looked into it. I should, but that the morality police are getting disbanded. Is that what I'm hearing correctly? Did you?
I read a few about it, but I couldn't source it as anybody actually saying it was
Yes,
accurate.
yes, that
Yeah,
is correct.
It is correct.
They've been
They
disbanded
have.
formally. I don't know if they're all released yet, but
Mhm.
as a concession, they have been completely disbanded.
And
Excellent. That's
and
great news.
the unfortunate part is it was not in time to prevent the executions that are going on to the recent protesters that have been arrested.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think
that.
one was executed yesterday. It was, to the
Mhm.
best of my knowledge, the
Mhm.
first one executed in relation to the protests. There are
Mhm.
more slated to be executed, and they are
Yes.
cracking down. They want it to stop. So
Hopefully.
anyone,
Mm.
well, I mean, Tehran wants it to stop. So what they're doing is
Mhm.
basically, if you're protesting, it's a crime against God, which is the death penalty. They're not applying it to everybody, but they're being pretty liberal about it, and
Mhm.
Yes,
doing
they
their best
are.
to stop this.
Well, they had said before that they wanted the death penalty brought to people who are involved in the protests. And that was one of the reasons why it was an affront to God, they said.
Yeah, the
So,
legislature was pushing the
yes.
judges to dramatically increase the penalties, and they
Mhm.
responded within 24 hours. That's what they're doing.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
This is an example of why you want a separation between church and state.
Exactly. But
Exactly. So, but I did see too that there were some minors that were at the last report I saw where there were some even minors that were at risk of being handed down the death penalty because of the protests,
mm,
which is scary.
minor.
That's really, yeah,
Wow.
minors, which, there were some 15 and 16-year-olds that were, a lot of them were in the protests and they would be put to death because they were protesting.
Mm.
There is, I mean,
Mm.
it's a medieval culture and it's a medieval way of looking at things. And back then, I mean, not even at the founding of the U.S., a 14-year-old was an adult.
Mhm.
So the Second Amendment guarantees
Right.
guns for 14-year-olds. That was the intent, because a
Mhm.
14-year-old was capable of making these kinds of decisions back then. 14-year-olds were often married as well. So we've moved on past that. There are a lot of psychological reasons that we understand too in our species. The length of uh, puberty and psychological growth has actually been growing. It's taking longer as our species
Mhm.
evolves. So it's great that we're doing that. But what other cultures that are still sort of stuck in those medieval times, yeah, a 14-year-old is absolutely an adult. And
Mhm.
while I obviously strongly object to that, I am aware that even in U.S. History, that was the case at the
Mhm.
time of the founding. It wasn't so foreign, but it obviously has to
Right.
stop,
Mhm.
and that's one reason they need to be brought into modern times.
Right. And just-
Right.
yeah. Nick, let me ask you, like, with the morality police being like disbanded, so they say, are they just putting their duties on someone else? Do you think this is just a way to get the world to stop looking at the protests so harshly, or what's going on? Or do you think it's real movement? Like they're really making a change there inside government?
It depends on how you define real movement. I think short term, it is absolutely real movement. I don't think that right now, to the best of my understanding, none of those responsibilities are being moved to any other organization. They are done, and they will stop enforcing those laws. My belief, however, is that they intend to do that for only 2 years and then bring those laws back. So it
Wow.
depends on how you
Yeah.
define real movement. But I think as of this moment, yeah, they're gone, and it's a huge victory. They absolutely intend to roll that back.
Oh, wow. So temporary. So real
Yeah.
change has to happen more
It's
change has to
happening.
happen. Like,
Unless, and I think they know that. I think that's why they're still fighting and why that's
Mm.
not a sufficient concession. The fact is, you still have the same government in charge that put them there in the first place. So as long as that government's there, they will come back. It won't be in under 2 years, maybe in as many as 5, depending on how much scrutiny from both the people and from other countries. But they will return. It'll be called something different, but it'll be the same.
mhm. Wow.
Exactly.
Mm. That's unfortunate because like they're
Absolutely.
just going to keep going because this is what happened before. They had privileges, they had some progress forward in dress code and a little bit of freedoms, and then it got slapped back again, and then protests. It's just going to keep going. Like it's just going to keep going every couple of years, more and more violence.
And it's just going to keep happening over and over again.
Mhm.
And then there is no real change there. They're just appeasing everyone right now is what it seems like.
Mhm.
That's not good.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I just, Dick, I posted an article in the green room that's more recent about some of the protests that was going on. One of the, how they're starting the executions and everything. And it's pretty nasty how they do it. They do it very barbaric. They do it like like the ancient, back like they used to do during the ancient times, and they have it in a soccer stadium. Yeah, it's just gross. But yeah. So we have that too if you'd like. But yeah, it's okay. All right. So that was a member message. Thank you very much. We had one from M2M, our very own Matt. He said, in Northern Ireland, same-sex marriage was a big issue till it was legalized in 2020. Still a hot issue as NI is seen as the Bible Belt of the UK.
Hmm.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yeah. So there we go. Thank you. There. So now we've got the article from Reuters. It says Iran holds its first execution over anti-government protests. So Iran hanged a man on Thursday convicted of injuring a security guard with a knife and blocking a street in Tehran. The semi-official Tasnim news agency said the first such execution over recent anti-government unrest. Nationwide protests that erupted after the death of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini on September 16th represent one of the biggest challenges to the Islamic Republic since its establishment in 1979. Authorities have been cracking down on the protests, and on Monday, the Revolutionary Guards encouraged the judiciary to swiftly and decisively issue judgments against those accused of crimes against the security of the nation and Islam. The Tasnim news agency named the executed man as Mohsen Shikari, but gave no further details. State media published a video of what it said was Shikari's confession, where he appears with a bruise on his right cheek. He admitted to striking a member of the Basij militia with a knife and to blocking a road with his motorbike alongside one of his friends. Rights groups have said Shikari was tortured and forced to confess. And it says, British Foreign Minister James Cleverly said he was outraged by the news of the execution. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the abhorrent violence committed by the Iranian regime against its own people, Cleverly said on Twitter. Germany also condemned the execution. The Iranian regime's contempt for humanity knows no bounds, said German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. But the threat of execution will not stifle people's will for freedom. Amnesty International has said Iranian authorities are seeking the death penalty for at least 21 people in what it called sham trials designed to intimidate those participating in the popular uprising that has rocked Iran. The Iranian authorities must immediately quash all death sentences, refrain from seeking the imposition of the death penalty, and drop all charges against those arrested in connection with their peaceful participation in protests, it said. Iran has blamed the unrest on its foreign foes, including the United States. Judiciary spokesman Masoud Sadiyashi said on Tuesday that 5 people indicted in the killing of a Basij military member, Ruhollah Ajamian, has been sentenced to death in a verdict that they can appeal. Iran's semi-official news agency ISNA reported on Thursday that 5 suspected members of the Islamic State militant group have been charged with war against God for their role in the massacre of Shiite pilgrims in October, a crime that is punishable by death. Even before the recent unrest, executions had been rising in Iran. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said that the number this year reportedly surpassed 400 by September for the
Wow.
first time in 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Wow.
again, it definitely speaks to their fear. When the retaliation is like that, I understand that their laws are very strict about going against their government as well as their religious beliefs. Well, it seems these people are young, like 22, 20,
Yeah.
17-year-olds, kids.
They're kids.
I don't see. It seems like the more that comes out about it, the worse it's going to get. Don't see how it helps them. By putting one person down, you're going to make 10 more that are going to come forward with loud voices.
Exactly. They're getting angrier about this because that's brutal. That's just,
Mm.
Well-
just for protesting. A lot of the times that's what they're doing. And they're coercing these confessions out of them by torturing them. And there have been reports of that we've read before about, them coercing confessions out of them by torturing them and beating them. And so it's not good.
Yeah.
So people are going to get angry. Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
The problem is actually usually 9 times out of 10 these tactics actually work. That's how they've stayed in power as long as they have. That's how that's how Putin has stayed in power, knowing that even speaking out against him, he can vanish. And it's deliberately playing into the first man problem, which is you don't have to stop all or even most or even a small part of the people who want a revolution. You have to stop the people who are going to be that first spark and who are willing to put their lives on the line to start it, because nobody wants to be the first one to stand up and say, oh, I think we should depose the dictator because that person's going to be killed. And if you can just always stop that one person, you don't have to worry about no matter how much discontent you have, as long as nobody wants to be that first person. So they make examples out of everybody they can. The problem is once that first person has really spoken up and you have someone who represents a movement, following that strategy now has the opposite effect of encouraging people, because they're like, oh, you can't kill us all. We now know it's not one person. We know it's all of us, and you're outnumbered. And then, so once you overcome the first man problem, which it looks like they have done successfully in Iran, they have not done it in Russia, and doesn't look like they're that close in Russia, but Iran, it looks like they've overcome it, and now
everybody's angry.
But it works 9 times out of 10. These strategies absolutely work.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think with Russia, they haven't reached that level yet, but I have noticed that the protests are continuing and they're still going on. And so I think they've crossed the threshold of the first man problem, it seems like. So that's that's one place where that's good news. Hopefully they'll make more headway
Mhm.
at least. So any more thoughts on that one?
Well, I just don't know how to get them to stop the killings before they figure it out, because
Right.
it's already established that that is their law, and you can't really go against their law, their culture, in how it got that way. But
Right.
it's a long process, But the disbanding of the morality piece, it does sound like a very good thing.
Yes.
But I don't understand the temporariness of it. It's like, why say you're going to disband it if you're just going to bring it back? It's just
Right. If you're just only suspending
Yeah.
it for now.
Yeah, doesn't that give opposing parties an argument for coming through and changing the government that is entrenched in there right now, if that's their intention? I mean,
Well, only if they say it, or you could prove that's their intention. I think
mm,
everybody knows that's their intention, but what they're going to say is, no, we've spoken to God, and God has made it crystal clear that these police need to go. And then when they bring it back, it's going to have a new name. It's going to be completely worded differently. And people are going to say, isn't this the same thing? And they're going to say, well, no, of course it's not the same thing. That would be going against God, and we would never do that. Now, here's all the things that it does that are absolutely identical.
oh,
And this happens in every
Mhm.
country all the time. Unpopular laws are struck down, and then another law that basically does the same thing but has
Mhm.
slightly different dressing and looks different, or is worded differently in a way that's actually completely irrelevant, doesn't address any of the major objections, comes up again. So they're going to wait until nobody looks. If you know and understand the government, you know they're going to do it again, but they've said they won't. It's a lie. They lie a lot.
Right.
But I think that's why it's hard to. You shouldn't support the government for a million reasons. This is just it's business as usual for them. They'll bring it back. It'll just be called something completely different.
Absolutely. Thinking that they're going to fool everybody with that. But
Mhm.
once they start doing the same time tested tricks, people are going to notice that, hopefully. And
But you'll end up with the first man problem again. So
exactly.
let's
It's a
say it comes
reset.
back. Yeah, let's assume that there isn't a revolution. 5 years from now, they say, we've noticed that there's a whole bunch of problems coming up. So we have a civility patrol that's going to come out. We're going to actually just draw from all the regular people here. We're not going to pick bad people. We're going to draw from the civilians, like my brother-in-law and this guy over here who's got all the military gear. This guy who was also in the military, just random people. And we're going to send them out amongst you and they do that. And someone says, wait a minute, this looks exactly like the morality police we had. And I just questioned them. So now I'm going to be executed. The next
Right.
individuals who want to question it, we're right back to the first man problem. How do you
Exactly.
question it without getting killed? So this has to work this time around, or it's going to be another 10 years before there's even a hope of a revolution.
Mm.
Absolutely. It'll be a complete and total reset right back to zero again after all the steps that they've been able to take. That's demoralizing for sure. And
Mm.
definitely that's, that does make people lose hope. And unfortunately, that means that they're back under the thumb again. So
Well, in 79, when the revolution happened, it was very similar to this. And it was once the teachers, the educators got involved, and the unions representing the businesses, which have all gotten involved now. So we have
Yep.
all the same conditions as the last successful revolution. Doesn't mean it's going to be successful, but I think there is cause for cautious optimism.
right.
Right. What you want to hear them say is not good enough. You disbanded it, fine, but not good enough. What are we doing to make sure it doesn't happen again? Like, hopefully, since they have the history of 1979, the language and how they push back will change enough to make it a little more solid in what they're looking for. Because things start going a little bit better, and we all get a little bit relieved. And like you said, it just backslides. It's a vicious cycle. It just keep rear their up head and just keeps going.
Well, that's it.
Mhm. It's like they need to just say, like, that's great, you got rid of that military police, but what are you really going to do about it? Like, perhaps if they push back, like it's really not that big a deal, and take their card away, the card that they're playing, that they're doing a good job. You
Right.
know, only with everybody talking about it is that going to happen. Just like Nick said, well, they appears that they're just going to be bringing it back. That has to be known inside that country, not just out here. We're all looking at it, but in there where they're fighting about it, that attitude has to be prevalent to push back.
Well, I think you hit the
Absolutely.
nail on the head.
Mhm.
And so the problem is, of course, they're not going to, they have to be removed from power. As long as they're in power, they will not make the changes that are necessary. So
Mhm.
the next question is, who credibly is going to take over in their stead? And that's the only one that does concern me. Is
Yes.
as of yet, I haven't seen a credible leader who could go into their place. The mob cannot take over, kick them out, and then try to rule. That was
Mhm.
tried in France. That had some consequences.
Right.
And that was the best example of it I've ever seen. They need to have a leader. To the best of my knowledge, they don't have one yet. So if they get one, I think we're looking at a successful revolution. If
Mhm.
they don't, I think things are going to get a lot worse, and either they will get one or it's going to get quashed, because you cannot just eliminate all of them without a replacement, or you have complete anarchy countrywide. And it's even worse than when they were in charge.
Exactly, because
Yes.
in all revolution, whether you win or lose depends on how long term you made your plan before you got in there. Because you might win the immediate fight, right, Nick? You get in there and it all goes to crap anyway, because you didn't think past, like, let me get through the door. No, they really does need the plan, and what are you fighting for, and this is what we want, and this is how we're going to do it, and all of that. And that
Specific
takes a
goals.
lot of organization and a lot of work.
Well, and
Yeah.
and the U.S. failed to do that when it went into Iran. So, or not Iran, Iraq. So we got rid of
Iraq.
Saddam
Mhm.
Hussein. But the
Mhm.
collapse
Ended up
after
with
that,
chaos.
yeah, and it
We
was
left
more
them with
lethal.
nothing, unfortunately. We left them with nothing and scrambling, and
A big
that's
vacuum.
uncool. Right. Totally uncool. You need a plan that just goes a little bit farther, like okay, so we win, and then ... like fill in the blanks, please, because
Well,
otherwise it's not successful.
they did have a plan. Give all the Iraqi stuff to Dick Cheney and his friends. That was the plan. And they actually were trying stuff there that, it was an experimental world where they were trying everything that the think tanks over here wanted to do, but never could. And it turned into the shit show.
Mm. Wow.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. You have to have some sort of plan. You have to have some sort of, what basic structure can we put in place until we get everything off the ground and we get everything settled, we get everything organized. They at least have to have something,
Mhm.
because if not, you will end up with a vacuum, and what's it going to be filled with? Even worse than what you just ousted.
Exactly. No plan, just strongest player take over.
Right. You're going to end up, it's,
Mhm.
it's going to be like the feudal times. It's going to be really interesting. So yeah, then no.
Yeah. But it is difficult, especially in times of unrest, because you need clear thinking people that are agreeing that the unrest is there and everything, and then what to do about it, how to settle the unrest and actually get real progress in there. It's one of the most difficult things. And it always happens with horrible, horrible times like this. Horrible unrest, much infighting, terrible hit stuff going on. And hopefully, something will emerge good out of it if somebody just buckles down and puts their plan in place, so to speak. Well, it's difficult.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you organize a whole bunch of people that are this angry?
Good point. Good point. Because they are angry too.
Mhm. How do you get them to rationally talk about what does the good Iran you want look like? What does that look like to you? Tell me, what does it look like to you? What are your 5 key things you need to live here in peace? You know, and like that. And they're just so angry. Everybody's 5 is going to be different, right?
Right. Absolutely. So, do you start organizing? Do you start having, holding a vote already on which 5 you adopt?
Right? It's hard because they
it's
all,
very hard.
at this point, everybody just wants to be heard. So,
Yes.
like, if you've got the age-old question, then who do you listen to? When everybody's screaming at you and everybody wants to be heard, who do you listen to?
Exactly. Well, that's it. But Allie had a good point about what happened before. Allie said, kind of like we left Iran with a revolution and bailed. So not unsimilar this time.
Mhm.
And this is what happened. The religious took over and
This is
Khomeini
why,
came in, and that's exactly what happened. So
because when you push down on people
yes.
without listening to them, and that's a problem. Even as horrible as we felt like that religious faction was acting and what they were doing, when you don't allow them their opinion or people to listen, and just push down, they're always going to rear back up. They're going to have the sympathy of people to say, look what you did, and rear back up, and it came back stronger.
Yep. Unfortunately it did, because again, that vacuum, and it has to fill with something. So what's it going to fill with? What's even worse? So that's exactly it. So hopefully, let's see here. Yeah.
So where around the world are we going next, Aimee?
I know. Well, we do have that article from Sky News about the UK summons Iran chief diplomat over abhorrent execution. So is that something we can pull right up, please, Dick? Thank you. He's fast.
He is fast. Look at that.
Very fast. Okay, so this is from Sky News, and it says the UK summons Iran chief diplomat over abhorrent Mohsen Shakari's execution. The protester was executed on Thursday after being accused of injuring a security guard with a machete and blocking a street in Tehran. The UK has summoned Iran's chief diplomat in London to protest the execution of Mohsen Shakari in the first known death sentence linked to recent anti-government protests. The prisoner was executed on Thursday after being accused of injuring a security guard with a machete and blocking a street in Tehran. Ahead of the execution, state media published a video of what it said was Shakari's confession, in which he admitted to striking a member of the Basij militia with a knife and to blocking a road with his motorbike alongside one of his friends. In the video, Shakari appeared with a bruise on his right cheek. Rights groups have said the protester was tortured and forced to confess. UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has instructed the FCDO to summon Mehdi Hosseini Mateen, the Iran chargé d'affaires in Britain, over the abhorrent execution by the country's regime. He is a tragic victim of a legal system in which disproportionate sentences, politically motivated trials, and forced confessions are rife, Mr. Cleverly said in a statement. We have made our views clear to the Iranian authorities. Iran must immediately halt executions and end the violence against its own people. In a meeting he held with Mr. Mateen, Vijay Ranjarajan, Director General for the Middle East, underlined the UK's view on the execution as a grossly disproportionate action designed to intimidate ordinary Iranians and stifle voices of dissent. He stressed that the UK opposes the death penalty in all circumstances, and it urged Iran to immediately halt executions and the imposition of death sentences. Mass protests have been widespread in Iran since the death of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini in the custody of morality police on the 16th of September. Hundreds of protesters have been killed and thousands jailed while demanding the overthrow of Iran's clerical leaders. Iran's government is said to be blaming the unrest on Kurdish separatists, calling it a political plot, and has accused foreign nations of inciting the demonstrations. So that's interesting.
Wow.
So they've accused just about everyone, including pretty much the West, as they put it, in
It is,
quotes.
yeah, they keep bringing that up, that it's Western influence that's causing all of this. It doesn't have anything to do
Yes.
with how their own people feel about them. it's,
Right.
it's all us. We're they've cut off most communications with us anyway. So I don't know how we're influencing them so much. I'd like them to explain that to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or something else.
It is. It is. Okay, so should we go to the US and Canada announce new sanctions?
Oh, yeah, that was big.
That was big.
That was big. It was nice to see people doing things all at the same time, coming out.
Yes.
It seemed bigger because there's quite a bit of it. And even the UK was weighing in a little bit there from what I saw. Well,
Yes, which
yeah.
is very good. So yes, can we please pull that up, Dick? Thank you. I love how fast he is. That's awesome.
I know he's ready.
Exactly. So speedy. Uh, so US and Canada announced new sanctions against Iran over protests. Washington sanctions 3 Iranian officials accused of participating in a brutal crackdown against protesters. The governments of the United States and Canada have announced another round of sanctions against Iranian officials accused of human rights violations as protests roiled Iran. The U.S. Department of the Treasury said in a press release on Friday that the sanctions target 3 Iranian security and law enforcement officials that the U.S. has accused of involvement in the detentions of anti-government protesters and the violence against them. Today, we have taken coordinated actions against Iranian officials connected to human rights abuses, including those committed as part of the ongoing brutal crackdown aimed at denying the Iranian people their human rights and fundamental freedoms, Canada and the U.S. said in a joint statement also released on Friday. The sanctions against Iranian officials are part of a larger U.S. campaign focusing on more than 40 individuals and entities across 9 countries on International Anti-Corruption Day. Among the countries identified are North Korea, Russia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mali, and the Philippines. The U.S. and Canada have targeted numerous Iranian groups and officials with sanctions over Tehran's harsh response to the protests against the death of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini. She died in September after being detained by Iran's morality police. The Iranian government carried out the first known execution related to the protests on Thursday. A man identified as Mohsen Shikari, he was 23 years old, was hanged for allegedly shutting down a street and attacking a security officer with a knife. Friday's sanctions were directed at Iranian officials who the U.S. said had been involved in government violence. Ali Akbar Javidan, commander for the law enforcement forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Kermanshah province, were accused of overseeing forces that had killed protesters. Ibrahim Kuchazeh, an LEF commander, and Shabahar, a city on the Gulf of Oman, was accused of raping a 15-year-old girl, spurring protests in which security forces are said to have killed more than 60 people. The U.S. also sanctioned Ala Karam Azizi, who oversees Rajai Shah prison outside of Tehran, which Washington says houses political prisoners who have been abused. Friday's sanctions freeze assets for the sanctioned parties and restrict individuals in the U.S. and Canada from engaging in transactions with them. The Treasury Department said it has issued 5 rounds of sanctions against officials and entities involved in the crackdown on Iranian protesters since September. Canada also barred entry to about 10,000 members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in October. Human rights activists in Iran, a group monitoring the protests, has said at least 426 people have been killed and more than 17,400 arrested as the Iranian government seeks to put down the protests. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, gosh.
I know.
But at least people are, becoming more aware and trying to do something. I don't know how successful sanctions like that are going to be, but
Exactly.
it at least puts a focus on it. The people are looking at it. You know what I mean? Like you can look at it positively that way. Well,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
done.
I know. And Ali had a great comment. She says that was like the honor roll for scumbaggery there.
Mhm.
You're right.
Yeah.
Very much so. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. And
Mm.
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
there's a question for Nick. I don't know if he's still available from him.
Okay.
From
Yeah.
MK. Do you see it?
I got to go in a minute, but I can certainly take. I got time for one more question. So yeah, I did not see the
Sure.
question. So.
It says, "Do you have insight about sanction protocol, U.S. or in general?"
I'm not sure what is meant by sanction protocol. So
It may be.
I mean, sanctions have different efficacy. Sanctions vary wildly on their efficacy varies widely depending on who does it, to whom, and exactly what it includes. The sanctions in Russia, for example, Russia has sanction-proofed their economy. They've switched it so that they're making everything internal that they need to survive. But the reason that they've moved from the advanced tanks to, I mean, they're literally building T-72s now. Now, T-72s were first manufactured in 1972. That's how old these tanks are. But they're the last tank ever made in Russia that doesn't need electronic components. It has no electronic components. You need a mallet to actually move the gears. And they can't use electronic components because the sanctions have actually had a crippling effect on their military. So we can't see necessarily how effective the sanctions have been, but they've worked very, very well. A lot of innocent people have suffered as well, so it's problematic, and it's not a decision to be made lightly, but it does appear to be working. Now, in Iran, I am not confident it's going to have any impact, but for American and Canadian businesses that are trading with the higher ups in Iran, which maybe they shouldn't be doing anyway. So
Right.
that may not be a bad thing stopping that, but they are also very well insulated. And eventually, I mean, the only other possibility down the road is we are trying to restart the failed treaty banning them from making nuclear weapons. They're probably about
Right.
5 months out from, so if they decide to do a crash program and build a nuclear weapon, they can probably have one within 5 months. So our goal is obviously to get them to voluntarily make that time longer by destroying some of their own equipment. And what are we willing to trade? The last time we agreed to this, the U.S. sabotaged the deal by falsely claiming that they weren't keeping up to it, and that was what Trump did. If we do a lot more sanctions, it may be that they're going to sit there and say, "Oh, we'd like you to remove these sanctions as well. Could you make them part of the deal?" So it's always difficult to tell what the end game is with sanctions. But in this case, I do not believe the sanctions will work directly. So I suspect either they are to placate the West to say, "Hey, we're doing something,"
Absolutely.
or as a bargaining chip in the future. But if it's going to have efficacy, I don't see how.
Right, bargaining chips for sure. I think that came up before when we were talking about the treaty in regards to nuclear weapons. The sanctions would be one of the strongest bargaining chips that they had on things like that. Well, and why they may be pushing more.
And why they're playing the same game. So now they're helping Russia, and we have to give up more if we're going to ask them to stop doing that. They're going to say, "Well, what are you going to give us for stopping doing that?" Well, we'll remove the sanctions. So the sanctions may have, and I suspect there's a greater likelihood than not that the sanctions have nothing to do with the protests. They have to do with Russia helping, with Iran helping Russia.
Yeah,
Believe it or not.
Yeah, I remember that conversation well because it was clear that it did look politically motivated in a PR game when you act what they physically were actually doing all along, and yet what they were saying and how things weren't matching up, and definitely looks more like bargaining chips and laying groundwork for a better argument in a stronger push for what they wanted.
which is cynical, but that unfortunately is more often than not
It,
how it works.
you know, when we
Yeah.
started talking and you laid it out, like I could see it clearly, like it all just snapped into place like instantly. So I was like, I remember that conversation well.
Thank you all for having me on. I
Yeah.
sincerely
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
We hope you feel better, Nick.
Feel
Thank you.
better. Thank you. And thank you for coming on.
We appreciate it.
We do. It's always, he always has such great insight when he comes on. It's always wonderful to have him.
Mhm. Yep.
Anna had a good comment. She said the Treaty of 2014, the Iran nuclear deal was in 2014 and it was abandoned in 2018.
Mhm.
So it was only in place for 4 years, but
Mhm.
so
Yes, and we didn't do right by that. We kind of backed that up
Mm-mm.
on that, you know, ourselves, and gave them good
Exactly.
reason to push back. Unfortunately, you know,
Right.
and that happens a lot because you go from there's different people in power, there's different parties in power, different agendas and legislating, different viewpoints on things, and sometimes they don't carry forward our deals the way we intended or the way that they were first
Exactly.
laid out. They have a different perspective on it, and they just can't wait to roll it back or change it or just totally disregard
Scrap
it.
it. Exactly. And
Yeah.
scrap it.
Um,
So yeah, unfortunately that's
Mhm. And we're not the only country that has that problem. I mean, every
oh
every
no.
country does
Oh
with
no.
these things, but it just seems to
Yeah.
happen really fast for us.
It does real fast.
Real fast.
Especially when if a certain someone doesn't get their second term. So or someone didn't get elected in the first place.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm getting so beat up with that person today, Amy. I just
I
can't. Oh my God.
know.
You know, I did have fun though. I mean, like I could pick and choose 20 legal cases. Like I only have to search one name. Like my research got easier for the next couple of weeks anyway.
Oh gosh, yes, because you got pages upon pages. I I always laugh when I look at certain things and you see the search results and you look up at the top, so many
Mhm.
millions of search results, and it's like, oh boy,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be
Mhm.
busy.
Mhm. Yep.
Oh yeah, so
And
it's absolutely
it's
incredible.
been an interesting couple of weeks. I've been in every layer of court system, like from the local to the state supreme, up to the federal supreme, and then back down again into this state and that state. Like he's everywhere. It's like I
And
gotta go
and
ahead.
he's always saying something, it's
Mhm. Mm,
oh my goodness.
mm.
Yep. So it's
For him, any attention is what he wants. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative attention. He's a 2-year-old.
Mm.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
he tweets like a 2-year-old, but then most of us have a tendency to do that when we get on Twitter sometimes. But I mean, to see
I
a lot more
know.
of it than just him in the juvenile character with what we're doing. I mean, even myself, I've been guilty of having a little bit of a fit about something. But
Oh, I've
mhm.
yeah, and I've been guilty of poking a person or two.
Yeah, but you poke him with a really cute cat. That doesn't count. Does that count? Nobody could say that was like bad. It's not bad.
Exactly. Me
Like,
and those cats. Everybody
yeah,
knows it's me who
exactly.
posts on. Because you go on my Twitter feed and it's always I'm
Mhm.
poking somebody with a cat. It's
Yeah. They are really, really cute, but they had this expression always when I look at them, no matter what they're doing, like they're going, really? Really? Like that's the look on
exactly
their face permanently, like with extra question marks.
permanent. Yes,
Really? Like
permanent
yep.
disgust and just
Permanently.
Rest-
Perfect.
resting disgusted face. I love
Oh,
it.
that's
They do.
resting disgusting face. RDF. The cat. I'm gonna remember that. Okay. Yes, they do have that. It's
They do.
classic. They do.
Thank
They
you.
do. Okay. Oh my gosh.
I think that's why I like them so much. They're always looking like, "Are you kidding me?"
I know. And you have to laugh. I mean, as serious as all of this is, if we don't,
Yes.
the strange thing is it's all true, and it just gets
Yes.
to be overwhelming, and you have to let a little bit of steam. We don't consider it a light subject at all, or
Right.
that it's
Oh,
father to
absolutely
humor.
not.
But if you don't let a little bit of that out,
Yes.
it just gets to be too much, and then you don't want to look at it. And the last thing that we need to
Mhm.
happen is people to stop looking at it and
Yes.
and talking about it and getting it out there and actually thinking about it and what can we do, because
Exactly.
it gets that uncomfortable. So it's almost the uncomfortableness and frustration of the situation that does bring the laughter out about it in certain makes you want to find a lighter note about
Absolutely.
it just so you can
Oh,
and
absolutely.
that's just human nature, but-
It's actually a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
Even if you're going through a rough patch, if you find something to laugh about, it's perfectly okay, and it's
Mhm.
actually quite healthy, and it'll help you a lot.
Mhm.
I've done it. I've used that tool in the
Mhm.
past. I've found moments to laugh about this week.
Yep.
So, it's just, and anytime you see anything bad, you just take a few moments just to have some lighthearted moments, you
Yep.
know, like me posting those silly kitties rolling all over the place,
Yeah.
Some of them are just, I mean, they're complete spheres. And if
Go
anybody
go
remembers
around.
exactly, if anybody ever remembers our past of debunking flat earth,
Mhm. Well,
spherical kitties disprove flat earth. There you
they
go.
do. Palace cats are proof, though Earth is round.
Yes,
Yes,
because they
yeah.
are too.
Gravity. That's because if the Earth was flat, so would they be. Just
Exactly.
saying. Mhm.
They would
Um,
be pancake cats, not
mhm.
palaces cats.
Yeah,
So
I don't know about you, Amy, but my nan used to always say, she used to say, a good laugh and a good sleep will set any day on its ear. Like no matter
yes,
what's going on, you get a good laugh out of it or a good sleep, you'll be all right. You're gonna make it to the next day.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Those two things don't always happen on the same day, but
Right. But but you can always squeeze it in there
Mhm,
somewhere. So
mhm.
yes. So we also had yesterday was World Human Rights Day.
Yes, can you
Uh,
believe? Hmm.
I know. With all of with the world seeming to be taking a step back and
Mhm.
going backwards, people aren't paying attention to their
Yeah,
history. Shame, shame. I'm wagging my finger.
I it's so
Me and
common that people don't. We make the same mistakes over
exactly.
and over again.
Over and over and over again
Uh,
because we have memories of goldfish. I swear, it's just crazy.
mhm. But it was nice to see that we actually have a World Human Rights Day and that it was
Yes,
actually acknowledged by the UN. And
absolutely.
so there was like, oh yeah, they remembered. Okay, that's good. That was an actual good thing.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yes, and they actually spoke on it too.
Mhm.
So may we have that, please, Dick? Super fast.
Nope, Dick, that's
um,
the
I'm
Marriage
sorry.
Equality Act. Okay, hold on. I got it. Right,
Yeah.
hold on.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me just dump it over in. You want it
Oh,
in
in the green
green?
room. Oh,
Okay.
yes, please.
All right. Hold it because I have it up.
Oh,
That.
thank you.
hmm This one. This is by Volker, right? You mean on Vocal
Yes.
Turk speech? Yeah, there it is. It's
There we
from.
go.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you so
Okay.
much. So we
Sorry.
have sorry about that.
Mhm.
That was my fault. I forgot to bring it up. Um, a Human Rights Day opening statement by H.C. Volker Turk, which
Mhm.
is going to be great. He says these are his words. Good morning. It is nice to see you again on the eve of Human Rights Day 2022, when we launch our year-long campaign to mark 75 years since the adoption of the miraculous transformative text of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In the midst of war in Ukraine this week, it was particularly poignant for me to recall that, as the preamble of the Universal Declaration states, it is the disregard and contempt for human rights that have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. In the many crises and calamities our human family is experiencing around the world, we are seeing these truths play out. But even where the challenges seem intractable, if the leaders in politics and society would only center their responses on human rights, the solutions will always be within sight. This is what the Universal Declaration states. It is what I believe, and it is what I hear from human rights defenders I have met from around the world. I heard it in Sudan last month, where civil society, led particularly by women and young people, have changed the equation on the ground, challenged society to move and evolve for the better with more liberties. I heard it in Ukraine this week, and I hear it resound every day through the work of my office on the ground and 104 field presences globally. Human rights violations anywhere concern all of us, everywhere. As journalists, every day you play an incredibly important role in ensuring that large-scale human suffering does not go unreported, and that the demands of the people are amplified so that those with the power, influence, and the funds hear it to make a difference. You will have seen my statement on Ukraine on Wednesday, and today I want to highlight for you a few other crises. In fact, situations that have serious effects and somehow have been forgotten, but don't make the headlines. Among those is Haiti, a crisis that has now actually forced its way back into the headlines. It cannot be ignored. This is a country where armed gangs, reportedly supported by economic and political elites, control more than 60% of the capital, where some 4.7 million face acute hunger. Since the beginning of this year, a staggering 1,448 people have been killed, 1,145 injured, and 1,005 kidnapped by gangs. And remember that behind each of these numbers are entire families and communities that are torn apart by the violence. Gang members are also using sexual violence to instill fear and exert control over the population, as a report issued in October by the Human Rights Service of the UN Integrated Office in Haiti highlighted. This is a multifaceted and protracted crisis, but solutions exist. They require political courage and responsibility at a national and international level. The root causes of the crisis, especially social inequalities, rampant corruption, collusion between powerful elites and gang leaders, and endemic impunity, must be addressed. It is unconscionable that there are people benefiting from this endemic insecurity and the suffering of Haitians. The recent Security Council sanctions regime and the targeted arms embargo against members of Haiti's economic and political elites who reportedly support these gangs financially and operationally send a very strong message to those threatening Haiti's peace, security, and stability. I call for on states to ensure that all those who wish to seek asylum have access to fair and efficient asylum procedures. Yemen. This seemingly interminable conflict must be brought to an end. The truce needs to be renewed and expanded to enable discussions on a path toward a more comprehensive settlement. While large-scale hostilities and airstrikes have generally stopped, we continue receiving reports of civilian casualties, especially of children near the front lines due to landmines and other explosive remnants of war. Also of concern are allegations of gross human rights violations, including torture, arbitrary detention, trafficking, extortion, and sexual abuse of people fleeing to other countries. The work of humanitarian actors must continue unhindered and their freedom of movement ensured. In Afghanistan, where the continued systematic exclusion of women and girls from virtually all aspects of life is unparalleled in this world, it deprives the country as a whole of the benefit of the significant contributions that women and girls make. I also deplore the continued use of corporal and capital punishment, including the most recent instances of lashings and executions carried out in public this month, in flagrant violation of Afghanistan's international human rights obligations. I urge the de facto authorities to establish an immediate moratorium on future executions and to abolish the death penalty. 5 years after the start of the conflict in Cabo Delgado, northern Mozambique, civilians continue to be killed and subjected to sexual violence, abductions, and forced disappearances, with ongoing destruction of property, including schools, health centers, and places of worship. Almost 1 million people have been displaced, more than half of them children. Addressing the root causes of the conflict will require protecting economic and social rights, preserving civic space, ensuring access to justice, and prioritizing young people and women in socioeconomic development and decision-making, and including, and that's very important in this context, on the use of natural resources that directly affect their lives.
Mm-hmm.
There is also Somalia, which faces a humanitarian catastrophe amid the longest and most severe drought in recent history. My office has documented a steep rise in civilian casualties, 76% of which are attributed to al-Shabaab. The reported casualties from January to November of 2022 672 people killed and 1,082 injured, are 51% higher than those during the same period last year. Serious human rights concerns also include the arrest and detention of journalists, hindering freedom of expression, fostering self-censorship, and aggravating pre-existing human rights vulnerabilities. Protecting human rights is a key component of humanitarian action. These and many other crisis situations that have faded from the headlines not only have severe consequences for the people directly affected, but are likely to have ripple effects across borders and risk further destabilizing their regions. One thing they and so many other crises have in common is disregard for human rights. They are marked and sometimes triggered by interlocking human rights violations. To name only a few, persistent racial and other forms of discrimination, violent crackdowns on dissent, violations of the right to an adequate standard of living, and as we are seeing now across each region, a cost of living crisis that is leaving many not knowing how they will survive from one day to the next. Hate speech, including unregulated digital environments, is only further contributing to setting back rights, such as gender equality, and there we have seen a big pushback. The brunt of the impact of these crises is always borne by the most marginalized, the most excluded, among those particularly women, children, migrants, indigenous peoples, internally displaced people, people with disabilities, older people, ethnic and racial minorities, and LGBTIQ plus people. And globally, we are also seeing a crisis of trust. The rise in social movements and protests across all regions is a clear sign of the corrosiveness of institutions that are supposed to serve people. The world cannot afford for its leaders to consider human rights only as an afterthought or worse, an instrument of geopolitics. What greater lesson did we glean from COVID-19 and the climate emergency than just how interdependent we truly are? That's a really big lesson, that we must come together to protect our shared human rights values and our shared humanity. I am launching the UDHR 75 initiative as an opportunity to recall the consensus this declaration envisaged, to reset and strengthen the remarkable human rights infrastructure we have constructed, to rekindle the spirit, impulse, and vitality that forged the UDHR 75 years ago, and to rejuvenate a worldwide consensus on human rights, one that unifies us in the face of so many challenges. The initiative will be coordinated by my office together with partners. It will involve activities and actions, including ways to renew people's awareness of and commitment to human rights, especially among young people. And we are going to find ways to think in new and innovative ways about human rights challenges. Written and adopted by representatives from all regions of the world, the UDHR makes it clear human rights are universal and indivisible, and human rights are the foundation for peace and development. UDHR 75 provides us with an opportunity for unity and hope, and that mobilizes the world for the cause of human rights, and that sets us on the path toward a better future that is based on justice and equality for all.
Wow.
Exactly. So that was
Exactly.
that was a really nice speech he had.
It
So
was. It's hard to
70
hear about all of that, but
it is.
the fact that they're looking at it is great. And I did just put the
Absolutely.
UHDR actually in the chat for anybody that wants to look into that initiative. It's
Thank you.
been there for a while.
Mhm.
But heartbreaking what's still going on.
Absolutely. In all the
75
places.
years ago.
Yeah.
75 years ago, this whole thing was born out of the horrors of World War II and the world saying, we don't want to go through that again. We want to contain the horrors of the Soviet Union. And just as the generation that put down Hitler and stared down the Soviet Empire are dying, we have idiots who don't give a shit about the world the greatest generation gave us.
There we go. Yep, that is very true. So it's incredible. But yeah, hopefully, I don't know. I'm hoping that we can look at all of these things and hopefully something will start to happen. Maybe we, we're seeing, tentative progress in in Iran. Maybe we'll see it in other places too. Let's.
I hope so.
I
When
hope
I
so.
read it, what really struck me is that remember in the beginning of our stream, we see like the simple answer of just everyone that's trying to address these issues, focusing on the human rights part first, to settle that first.
Exactly.
In
Exactly.
most of, and so much of this disappears. It makes it
Yes.
more easily workable for the other issues that are going on. But people don't want to look at that first. Like it's
Exactly.
they only focus on what is actually affecting them personally, like right then and there, their biggest issue.
Exactly.
But the countries themselves have to look at just human rights in general for their own people. Happy people in a country very rarely cause this kind of dissent, violence, aggression towards each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, half the issues that people, want addressed, if you address the human rights issues, pretty much covers them.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's just incredible that constantly it's forgotten, and so people have to rise up and fight to have the, basic human rights. They have to fight just to have, you know, just to be recognized as equal humans. I mean, regardless of what differences men and women have, we're still created equal under the law. We should be treated equally under the law and
Exactly.
everywhere. Not,
Um,
you know,
we're only talking about life, liberty, and happiness, okay? When it comes to the
right,
Constitution,
exactly.
it doesn't mean that we're bigger or better. It doesn't mean that you're
No,
weaker or less. No, it just means,
it just means
the same
under
thing: life and liberty and happiness, justice for all.
exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
Like,
We're all in
let's start there, okay? And nothing else
exactly.
matters, okay? Nothing else matters. Let's just start there as
Well,
far
if
as
you start
America.
there,
Yeah.
mostly you cover everything that needs to be covered anyway.
Yeah, well, and I know we make it sound so simplistic, but why is it so hard to do that? Why is it so hard to go back and say when they made that statement, they mean everybody? Like, why is that so difficult?
I don't know. I think because there are some who worry that someone else will get more than them.
And
I'm wondering if
yeah,
it's
and
that.
and I'm not even asking them to go back and say, well, that's what we meant. How about that's what we mean now? How about it's 2022, so that's what
Just
we
like
mean
an
now?
affirming,
Like,
yeah, just an
hello?
affirmation of that,
Like, yeah, that's what they said then, and I get it, and I don't want to presume what they were thinking and what they were doing and getting all into that civil law, in the constitutional law, and all of that. And no, how about it's 2022? How about let's just say that's what we mean now? So let's just make that clear. Period.
I
Okay.
know. How hard is it to make a freaking affirmations, a statement of affirmation saying, well, we mean everybody.
This is
Well,
it. You mean this is why they don't
it's
want
like
us.
pulling teeth.
They don't want us to do it. They just don't want us to do it.
No.
You know, hmm.
It's amazing to me. Well, it's like I just don't understand some of the things that happen in different countries that just well, like look at Afghanistan that was mentioned in that. I want to
Mhm.
highlight that too.
Still,
Still,
right.
still to this day, and women are being pulled back from society again, and they're being told that they can't contribute.
Mm-mm.
Why? I don't care about. Yes, it's their culture. Yes, it's their religion. But why?
Can you not practice your culture and your religion without being that disruptive to human rights?
Well,
Maybe
that's
not
it.
like, the beatings, the abuse,
Yeah.
these things, they don't need to happen to have your culture and your religion.
No, they're not a huge part. They're not based around that.
Right.
You
So,
can still
mm,
believe in whatever religion you choose. You can still practice that, but not
mhm,
abuse people. What's that?
mm.
You
What
know?
it's when you actually abusing it on another person because of it that it becomes an issue. And why do you have to go that far to make somebody if you have your belief, do you not really believe your belief? Do you actually need everybody else to believe it too for it to be true? That bothers me,
There we go. There we
right?
go.
Yeah,
They have
I know. Damn it, Bear, go away. Don't even start with it. I know, but it's true,
Well,
right?
you're
It's
You're
a
making
valid point.
sense. If you need this, if you need the state to bully everyone into either accepting your religion, or if your religion is so weak that you need bullies to codify it for you, it says something.
Right. How valid
Right.
is your strength in your belief? How right are you in the strength of your belief? If you
Right.
have to push it on another for it to be true,
To
what is
expect
that?
others to live
That is
under
not
what
that is
you
not what
personally believe.
exactly. That's not the definition of belief, is it? Is the way I understand it, that you truly believe it for yourself, like, and it's the way it is. If you have to force others to do it, then how truly do you really believe it? That that's the way it should be.
Right.
Mm.
Right. It's just I don't understand that. I've never understood that, and I've struggled with that when I see even just with the simple stuff that's happening here in the US. Obviously, it's not as bad as what happens in Afghanistan or in Iran or any place like that. But it's something that you see in different scales in different places, and how people feel that they must even make laws based on their religion
Mhm.
for everybody to follow. And it's like, and like our country was founded, it was founded on the freedom of religion. That was a big reason why one of the big reasons why it was founded. The First Amendment, for crying out loud.
Mhm.
The freedom of religion, it's right in the very first one in the Bill of Rights.
Yep.
So why should we
The-
have to all have to be governed by one religion and have
Mhm.
just their rules, or have their beliefs be part of how we govern our country? It's just
Mhm.
The
It's not
founding fathers learned from the Puritans' experiment. It wasn't more than a few generations that the Puritans realized they were going to have to kill their kids or pretty much lax up on it. It was a brutal tyranny to the point where the Puritans even outlawed Christmas. Talk about the war on Christmas. The Puritans outlawed Christmas.
I'm trying to remember who said it, but someone said, and I hope someone can remind me in the chat. But if there is only one way and you have only one way, you're almost certain for it to be the wrong way. Definite. If you can only look at it just one way. If you're not open enough to the other people's contributions or other people's ways of doing it, it's almost definitely going to fail. It's kind of like a Murphy's Law thing. What's going to go wrong is going to go wrong. But I can't
Absolutely.
remember who said it, and it was just recently too. But it's like if there's only one way, it's guaranteed to be the wrong way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. But I was heartened by the speech, as much as there was really awful things talked about in it.
absolutely.
The fact that they recognized it, that they realize it's an international problem, it's everywhere in every country, and all over the place in some degree. There are rights being violated everywhere. Indeed,
Absolutely.
everybody needs to look at it together, like everybody.
Everybody.
Mhm. That's the hard part.
Exactly. It's getting everybody to look at it. Yeah. And especially those who are doing the human rights violations. They're the ones who really, really, really need to look at it. So, so yeah, there have been some good comments in the chat too. It's they've been great.
Oh, they have.
They have. There's been
I
some
know.
great interaction. So thank you so much, everybody. It's been great. Mark Beiser had a good one. I'm for outlawing Christmas. We should go back to its real roots and celebrate the Sol Invictus. There we
Yeah.
go. Why
Mm.
not?
Okay, Mark. Let's start it. Let's
There
start
we
it.
go.
The unconquered son of Rome, the god of soldiers, for anyone who didn't know.
Okay.
The holiday was on December 25th, and it was a Roman pagan holiday.
There we go.
Oh.
Yep.
Mm.
Yes. Well, So any more thoughts on that one? That was a good speech. And it was good to highlight, the crises that aren't being covered in the news right now and probably should be as well. But it was good to see that. So, and I think we had some good ideas too about continuing to, take moments, even though the past few years have been very strange, to
Yeah.
take some moments to have some lighthearted moments because it is good for you.
Mhm.
It's really good for you. So, yeah, definitely look into that. So, yeah. So,
I I think there was a good piece, a good place to actually leave the conversation on a somewhat
yes,
knowledgeable but kind of hopeful note. Like,
absolutely.
which that speech was. There was some really rough parts of it to hear, but you need
Right.
the knowledge to actually appreciate where he's going with it. And I hope people do check out the initiative and see what the countries are trying to, what the UN is trying to do with it. Lately, the UN has been thought of as just a so to speak, a mouthpiece, really not doing anything. But if they are working on initiatives that actually people belonging to the UN can actually follow and then follow up with when they're not doing it and give them something to work with, it is how things like the morality police get disbanded,
Yes.
because things like the UN come out and say, but you signed this that said you weren't going to do that, and you have a whole organization over there doing that. And,
Yeah.
kind of how things, they don't force you to do anything. They're just like, look at here,
They pointed out.
yeah, they point it out.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm,
Sometimes that's effective. Sometimes it's just
mhm.
it's not. So but hopefully this time it will be. If hopefully people, more and more countries will say, look, this is enough. We need to really concentrate on human rights now.
Mhm.
It's freaking 2022, people. Let's just focus on it. It's time to focus on it. So
Mhm. It's not just one country or another. They do mention a lot of the third and second world countries when they're talking about this stuff, but right here in America, we're dealing with it in our own Supreme
absolutely.
Court, our own legislation, and
Absolutely.
right, and ongoing. So like the bigger countries are not excluded from any of that. That
Absolutely.
human rights and just equality in general would
Exactly.
would be a good thing. And I know that sounds funny, like we're
Absolutely.
we're saying it as women, right? But like I
Mhm.
know plenty of people are just saying it in general, that a lot of it would just stop if we just could do that.
Absolutely.
But how? How do we do that? Why does people get so insulted about it? I don't understand.
I don't
Uh,
know. It's the weirdest thing. I'm not sure I understand that aspect of it yet, but
mhm.
to
Well,
be insulted,
I can give you a clue as to, at least in America, why some people feel they need to go out of their way to make other people's life a living hell. First, the propagandists make people who are not persecuted feel persecuted. And then they pull enemies out of their ass and create enemies that don't exist and focus on one or two things that most of the population does not engage in. I've actually just joked about how incompetent the Russian forces were, and people came out of the woodwork at McDonald's and a cab driver trying to justify Russia's actions because LGBTQ and Russia does not do woke. And somehow these people feel threatened.
What? Hmm.
I know
That's just bizarre to me. Well,
it's very bizarre. I know it's
It
insanity.
makes no sense, but they do that.
Absolutely, they do. Hey, MJ had a great comment in the chat as well. GDP is tied to human rights. Respecting self and others leads to prosperity.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
more money. Come on, people.
It does lead to
In
prosperity.
most cases.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. In most cases, it does. So even if it's not the primary focus, but if it's at least one of the things that you're focused on, you're headed in the right direction. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Making
wow, it was
enemies obviously limits your opportunities. Obviously, like that's just a
obviously, yeah.
no-brainer, right? The smaller
Mhm.
your circle, the less you got to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Freedom, the rights of the individual, and the protecting of those rights and democracy leads to prosperous open markets. Markets do not necessarily lead to freedom. Take China, for example.
Right. They have one of the biggest economies, and they're
Mhm.
horrible for human rights abuses. They're another place that seems to have fallen from the wayside, like with the Uyghurs and stuff
Mhm.
like that. That probably needs to be re-highlighted again as well. So
Mhm.
maybe that's something to look into at some point.
It is. I think we have a big one coming up next weekend, don't we? Still. Maybe, yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, we do. Had to look at the date and then count. So yes,
Because
next
this month is flying, isn't it? It's like I can't
flying.
believe it's November and December, just
I
too
know.
fast for
Way
me.
too fast. Way too
Yeah.
fast. So yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
So yeah. So I think next week we have a great show planned for you too as well. And of course, the shows always have great shows for you starting towards the weekend. So
Mhm.
keep an eye on this space, everybody. That would be a good idea. So I'm thinking we should go around the room and see what everybody's thoughts are. Yeah.
Yeah. I
All
think
right.
we wrapped it nice. I think that's a good way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So, Commander, what are your thoughts on tonight?
Tonight was really great. A lot of subjects were touched on. We could probably go on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end. So this is a big topic and it should be revisited at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how about you, Claire?
I truly enjoyed the conversation. I loved having Nick here for his perspective. Is always great on his knowledge of politics and what's going on. They're always interesting takes. I'm surprised at how much we agree. I never thought
Exactly.
that we would, but we do. And also,
Absolutely.
in regards to human rights, I don't think that's a topic that's going away because just
Mm-mm.
about everything else we cover and talk about is going to have something to do with it. So I don't see it going anywhere soon. Maybe not whole big hour-long shows just on that, but because it's such a big topic, it's going to be
Mhm.
in it almost everything.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to color just about everything we cover. So,
Mhm. And again, I thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoy these conversations, and I look forward to having more.
thank you so much. Me too. Me too. So, thank you for that. And Dick, what are your thoughts on this evening, if you can?
I'll reserve thoughts, but I'm going to do a shout out to Starsky's merch store for his Christmas lineup. Oops, wrong link there. Sorry. Hold on a second. Here we go. And the link's in the chat as well. And if I
Thank you.
scroll down here, you'll see there's some cool Christmassy stuff and whatnot. And oh yeah, you can have a
Excellent.
lot of fun over there. So Starsky's merch store, great place to spend a few Christmas dollars
Aw.
and have some fun.
And Puppy is even on one of the pillows. That's so
Yeah,
I
see
know.
that?
That's brilliant. I love it. Von Dalen said, I'll reserve thoughts. Someone hasn't been listening. That's brilliant. I love it. But that's awesome. And I like the puppy being on the pillow too. That's really cute. So
That
I
is
think
really
that's
good.
great. So it's been a great evening. I want to thank everyone in the chat for coming. Thank you so much. Your interaction and engagement have been wonderful. So thank you for that. I want to thank everyone in the panel for coming as well. I want to thank Nick as well. He's always brings great insight into everything like that. So yeah. So thank you very much. And I wish everyone a great evening. See you next week.
Yeah. Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
It's over. Go home.